So it's Tokyo, February 2014, more than a decade ago, and this company called Mt. Gox was handling around 70% of the world's Bitcoin trades. And suddenly, just like we saw with FTX, it collapses. And 850,000 Bitcoins, which is worth around 50 billion today, not much money, of course, it's very low amount of money compared to the hacks that we see today, was gone. And that became this history of the vanishing Bitcoin. Today in this podcast, we go in depth about this historic hack, how it happened, and we actually hear from one of the first-hand accounts of that incident. So let's go.
Thanks, Mohamed. So I'm Jean. I will try to support you in this story. I don't really understand everything that's going on with Bitcoin, but I remember one time I lost my pants in Ibiza, and I wake up in a pizza parlor. So I know a lot about losing stuff like that. So let's hope I can help you with this endeavor. And Jake Adelstein, who wrote the main book about this case, will be joining us here and there.
Well, John, I'm not sure it's the same as your trousers, but yeah, thanks for helping me with this.
You're welcome.
We move on to the first part of the story, which was the gold rush. Mt. Gox actually launched as a card trading platform, if you could believe. It was around 2010 when Bitcoin was actually, inaugurated by Satoshi Nakamoto. And, just a year later in 2011, this young French programmer named Mark Karpeles bought this site and actually turned this card trading site into the world's largest Bitcoin exchange. Within the next 2 years, this platform saw massive success, and it actually processed 7 of every 10 Bitcoin trades around the world. So it was a big deal. It was a very big deal.
Okay, hold on. So if I understand well, this guy, he was trading Wizards of the Coast, Magic the Gathering cards, and then he turned into trading Bitcoin. That's correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so basically it's like you open a strip club and then you decide to trade government bonds, and that's how you make your money?
Well, I can't argue that fact, but it was a pivot. Of course, it was a pivot, and it made Karpelès a king, but for a moment, just like it did with Sam Bankman-Fried. So, and
that was, I guess that was an accident waiting to happen. Yeah, correct?
Yeah, of course. Like you put a programmer. Karpelès was a programmer. He was a coder. He was not a CEO, and that was the trend at that time. You saw a lot of guys who were actually programmers, tech guys, nerds. I say myself as a nerd, and nerds like me who had no idea about running a business, who had no idea about running finances, were actually in charge of this billion-dollar growing industry. It's just gonna go wrong at any point.
Okay, so why don't we cut to Jake Adelstein and listen to how he came across the story of Mt. Gox and how he met Mark Karpeles for the first time.
Let's do it.
I was working on these stories with Natalie Kyokostuki, who is a Swiss journalist, but the Swiss-Japanese journalist, but the part of Switzerland that speaks more French than German. These things, to me as an American and someone who spent most of my life in Japan, I'm always surprised that it's like, what, you've got different speaking parts of Switzerland. But she was able, because she's cute, and much more handsome, more attractive than me, was able to get to Mark Karpeles and get him out and arrange meetings with him. And to me, I'm a true crime guy, right? And the first question that I ask myself is, okay, you've got 850,000 Bitcoins missing. Now, are they missing or are they stolen? That's what I'm going to ask. I'm going to look at this as a crime. And the first time I met Mark, there's something sort of off about him, and I couldn't decide. Because I spent a lot of time dealing with Yakuza. Most Yakuza are sociopaths. They have no conscience. They lie to you with a straight face. After a while, you get kind of a Yakuza radar, like this is a dishonest, not trustworthy person. And when I met Mark, there was something off about him, and I didn't feel like he was telling me everything. But I also didn't get the sense that he was a master criminal. And so I became very intrigued. because he is the most likely suspect. Did he take the money and run? Did he screw up the company so badly that he was hiding the money because he knew that the whole thing would fall apart? And I had no idea. And that's what really got me interested in this story.
So let's talk about the crash. So this happened around early 2014, just 3 years into Mt. Gox operating, and customers noticed something was going strange, everything was slow, their funds were disappearing. It didn't look good, and suddenly, slap out of nowhere, Mt. Gox comes, they file for bankruptcy at the end of February in Tokyo District Court, and it was shocking.
The CEO of Mt. Gox, Mark Karpeles, has revealed the loss of 850,000 bitcoins.
Before Mark got arrested, I met with him. I met with Natalie, and I think that the Nikkei or something. I believe it was the Nikkei ran an article. It was like, Mark Karpeles will be arrested today, right? They very soon. And he was still convinced, right? Because there's still people talking to the police that that he would be fine. And, Mark's mantra was always, should be fine. And I said, okay, we need to meet Mark. And I sat down with him and I explained exactly how the system worked. I said, Mark, they're going to arrest you. They're going to pull you off the middle of the night. They are not going to give you bail. They are going to, encourage you to sign a confession. They're going to probably draw up a statement in your own words in Japanese, because Japanese. They're going to read it out loud to you. They're going to ask you to sign it. Don't do it. Don't confess. No matter what you do, no matter how many times you arrested, do not confess. Because even though you could later say to the judge, I was coerced in this profession, the judges and the prosecutors here are, locked hand in hand. They will never believe you. So if you didn't do it, no matter what you do, do not confess. Do not confess, no matter how many times you get arrested, no matter how many charges they throw at you. And they will keep telling you that if you don't confess, they will, that the charges will pile up. That's how they pressure you. But you cannot give in. I mean, it is going to be, one of the toughest things in your life. But hold on. Don't, the only way for you to win this is don't confess. If you don't confess, there is a chance that they may even drop the charges, because prosecutors hate to lose. Because, when you have 99% conviction rate, if you indict someone and you lose the case, that is like a black mark on your career as a prosecutor that will follow you wherever you go. It's like a yakuza cutting off their finger when they've screwed up. Mark was in prison for about a year. So technically, right, he's in detention. But when you're in Japanese jail and you've been indicted, you don't have access to your cell phone. You can't read books in your own language most of the time. The lights are on all the time. The air conditioning is terrible. Sometimes there's no heat. You sleep on a crappy futon. The food is awful. And it's inhumane. I mean, Amnesty International has been lambasting the Japanese detention system for years. And basically you're at the victim of the prosecutors, which can interrogate you 8 or 9 hours a day. And you don't have a lawyer present. So it is a very dismal, horrible place to be. And Mark got so stir crazy. He smashed his head into, the walls once. He lost a lot of weight. I mean, he's put a lot of it back on, but by the time Karpelès finally got out of jail, and we went and had coffee at the same place where I'd given him the lecture about not confessing, I mean, he looked like a different man. I mean, he was a different man.
So Jake was not the only guy to have been involved in this case. There were others as well. There were other testimonies, someone from WISEC investigator called Kim Nielsen. They said that by 2014, Mt. Gox's books didn't add up, and on-chain data showed that the drain started as early as 2011. So that means when they actually started the company, the exploit began at that time, and it was into their system for more than 3 years, and they just didn't, they just didn't see it. They were bleeding out for years, but no one saw it coming.
Yeah, it was a pretty interesting time because actually every sleuth of a Bitcoin ecosystem starting to try and find the missing Bitcoins. So a lot of people show up in Tokyo. There was Kim Nielsen. There was also Jesse Powell at the time, who's was already the CEO of Kraken, who tried to investigate and help the Japanese police. But it was a big mess because it was completely new, and for the Japanese police and the Japanese investigator, it was like terra cognita, and they didn't know what to do about what had happened. But for sure, the Prime Minister of Japan wanted the case solved as soon as possible. And here again, Jake Adelstein can testify for us of what happened at the time between the police and the political aspects of the story.
Mark was providing them everything, databases and information, and it seemed to be a very cooperative relationship, and that they were, on the trail of the criminal. But at the same time, they didn't understand blockchain. They didn't understand, cryptocurrency. This was a total new field to them. I mean, their level of investigation was like someone, phishing someone through a fake email or a URL, or, getting someone to give them the password to a bank account and then hacking into the bank account. I mean, this was a whole new area for them, and they really didn't have anyone who has specialized in this field, and they were at a loss. I mean, in many senses, they were kind of learning to, investigate blockchain transactions and things through Mark Karpeles. I mean, he was their suspect, and he was their teacher. Now, that's a pretty bizarre place to find yourself as a cop. I think it was cooperative, and I think if the Japanese police had been allowed, if the IT section, the IT crime guys had been allowed to continue their investigation on their own, that they would have eventually figured out what had happened. But the problem was that Prime Minister Shinzo Abe at the time, who had a tremendous amount of power, like Macron on speed, so to speak. And no offense to people who like Macron over there, but like a supercharged Macron, or even almost a Trump vibe. He was like, "Hey, I want to make Japan the crypto capital of the world. Like, this is a huge chance for Japan to be number one." We've got Mt. Gox here. We had Mt. Gox here. Cryptocurrency is the new economy. We have a tremendous chance here. And he said, but this case makes Japan look bad. This is a terrible embarrassment. If we can't solve this thing, then no one is going to feel safe investing in Japan. So not only do we need an infrastructure, we have to solve this case. And he put direct pressure on the National Police Agency, which put direct pressure on the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Agency to solve this case by any means possible. Mark was the most likely suspect, and that arresting him would send a signal that Japan was serious about policing the world of cryptocurrency. It made it easy for them to arrest him. And they also didn't know that he would have, a good lawyer. I mean, and I think they really did believe, okay, this isn't that complicated. Certainly it must be Karpelès who's responsible. And so, let's take him down. And it just so happened for, Mark, that he was lucky enough that his lawyer was actually really good. But still, as time was going on, I was watching this investigation go on, and after being a reporter in Japan for like 30 years, I know when the police are leaking certain things that they're setting up the stage. And Nikkei and the Yomiuri Shimbun were running. I used to write for the Yomiuri Shimbun. It's Japan's largest newspaper. We're running articles clearly based on leaked information from the police that Mark Karpeles is guilty. He's the only person who could have embezzled this thing. That's the way the police are going. And I was like, okay, it doesn't matter what the truth is. Karpeles is going to be arrested. And I began to ask myself, is Mark guilty? Do the police know what they're doing? And I began thinking about other cases that the police had done over the years involving cybercrimes. And I was like, these guys are clueless. there was this one point where one of the judges said to the prosecutors, you can't keep throwing things at the wall and hoping something sticks. Are you done? You better tell me you're done, because I've had enough. You keep adding charges. And they're like, okay, we're done. So then it became an issue of, putting him on trial. And Japanese criminal cases like this, which are complicated and involve expert testimony, can go on for years. When in this case, it did go on for years.
Mm-hmm. But finally, in court, he gets out free.
And one of the great things about, he got a suspended. So there were 3 counts against Mark Karpeles, like embezzlement, breach of trust, and improper transfer of funds. Now, the improper transfer of funds was a fairly cosmetic, weak charge, normally one that wouldn't even be taken to court. And I think that the court wanting to let the prosecutors save face. I mean, this is Japan, right? The prosecutors and the judges are always buddies. Okay, the judge, and the judge chastised the prosecutors and the police who testified. He basically said, this whole case is predicated on the belief that Mark Karpeles hacked Mt. Gox. And I understand that, even though you're protesting the admission of this other evidence, and I understand that, you basically grabbed him on these charges because you expected of something else, whether you admit it or not. These charges you put against him are flimsy. They don't hold up. They don't stand up. Not guilty, not guilty. Guilty, suspended sentence. And, the difference in media coverage was really interesting, because the papers that had kind of convicted him, before the trial had even ended, were kind of like, Karpeles found guilty on one count, not guilty on others. And, and the other ones were, like Tokyo Shimbun, which is a really good paper, was kind of like, Mark Karpeles found not guilty, given suspended sentence, for minor charge. So, there's many ways you can report this.
At some point, there was a strange relationship between the Mt. Gox case and the Silk Road case. Can you explain a little bit about it?
Sure. So, Silk Road, which was the underground Amazon.com, right? Where you could buy drugs and pornography and weapons and poisons and many different things. Although originally they were much more stringent about what they would let you trade on there. Was created by this American named Ross Ulbricht, a libertarian, smart kid. And most of the transactions for the Silk Road went through Mt. Gox. If you wanted Bitcoin, and if you wanted to buy Bitcoin and trade fiat currency through Mt. Gox, was 80% of the trade. So, the DEA and the FBI and the Secret Service went to Mark Karpeles and said, we're investigating the Silk Road, and we would like your cooperation. And Karpeles cooperated with him, because he is many things, but he is not a sociopath. And if you go to him and tell him, like, your platform is being used to fund operations that are resulting in people's death and harm, he said, sure, I will help you as best I can. And so he did. But as this investigation was going forward, and partly due to Mark's cooperation, and they eventually arrested Ross Ulbricht, also known as the Dread Pirate Roberts, a name he took from a famous book by William Goldman, The Princess Bride. And the defense was trying to, claim that he wasn't responsible for the Silk Road, that he was just, a caretaker in a sense. Among the many strategies they tried one is to claim that Mark Karpeles, because he was operating the Bitcoin exchange where the transaction was actually the real Dread Pirate Roberts. Meanwhile, in some weird sense, the Japanese prosecutors and police had begun to entertain the notion that Mark Karpeles was actually Satoshi Nakamoto as well. So suddenly, the dumpy, I'm sorry, Mark, if you're listening to this kind of dumpy, chubby, happy-go-lucky French guy, really into Japanese culture, was, being portrayed as, a criminal mastermind running the world's biggest underground site, an embezzler, and also the inventor of Bitcoin. All claims brought up in the Ross Ulbricht trial, which made no sense and were laughable. But, as a reporter at the time when these would come up, he'd be like, okay, I have to treat this seriously. I can't just sneer at it. So you'd read through the depositions and the documents submitted, and and I reached out to some of the special agents on the case, and I was like, do you think that Mark Karpeles is really the Dread Pirate Roberts? Is there any possibility of this? And there were people working on the Silk Road case that thought like, well, okay, maybe Mark Karpeles really is the Dread Pirate Roberts, right? Maybe he's, maybe while he appears to be like a Cheshire cat that's sort of sitting there quizzically, nodding his head on his, taking interviews on a big bouncy ball, maybe this guy is really, the Moriarty of cybercrime. So,
Okay.
I never took it seriously.
And finally it gets even weirder because Donald Trump pardoned Ross Ulbricht.
Not only did Donald Trump pardon Ross Ulbricht, and he did that because Ross is a staunch libertarian, right? Libertarians are like, there should be no government restrictions or regulations on anything. And the libertarian community was always like, Ross Ulbricht was just providing a platform. The problem is people who are using the platform. If someone sells illegal products on Amazon.com, do you arrest Jeff Bezos? No, and they have a little bit of a point. At the same time, because I know Special Agent Gambarian and other people who worked on the Silk Road case, my personal feeling is that Ross did some things that were highly illegal and justified him being put in jail. Personal opinion. Now that he's out of jail, I certainly don't want to be sued by Ross. But, there's a convincing case that he wasn't the saint that he is. But, yeah, Trump gets a lot of money for libertarians. He's really into cryptocurrency now. And, I think he had sort of made a backdoor promise that he would release Ross Ulbricht, which he did. And and not only did he release Ross Ulbricht, but gave him a pardon, but he released technically the person who really hacked Mt. Gox. Now, I'm kind of giving away the book if I give that away, but you can read the book. But in one of the most stunningly stupid decisions I've ever seen a president make, he made a deal with Russia to essentially free the person who is certainly responsible in a large part for the hacking of Mt. Gox, which is just mind-boggling. I can only assume that it's because that individual, Mr. V, had close connections with one of Putin's oligarchs.
So what happened to Mark Karpeles? So you have to understand that the grand scheme of things, it wasn't Mark's fault that the exploit happened. At the end of the day, he went to prison for a year, but then came out and was cleared by the court as a free man, as someone who's innocent, because it was, at the end of the day, at its core, it was a security incident, one that could have been dealt better. It was like Mt. Gox was this Fort Knox, but it was built on wet cardboards. So that's why it happened. But at the end of the day, the CEO itself was very transparent. They tried, they attempted to fix things, but they just couldn't. And yeah, Mark served his time and he was cleared by the court. But where did the money go? That's the big question, right? There was a lot of money. So where did it go?
Yeah, but you need to mention one of the most amazing part of the case, which is Mark actually found 200,000 Bitcoin left from the heist. And where did he find it? He found it on a block of paper that was stuck inside a sofa. Mark has this thing for sofa, like the Vice President of the United States. J.D. Vance, he has this special relationship with sofas, and Mark has a special relationship with sofa. He used to hide 200,000 Bitcoin on a stack of paper, and he called that a cold wallet, but it was only the private keys that were written on a stack of paper that he hid in his sofa at the headquarters of Mt. Gox. He found it and he handed them back to the judge, and that's how, later on, some of the people lost their money. They finally managed to recover it. So yes, he was free, but the mystery was still complete, and nobody knew who actually stole the bitcoins.
Yeah, most of it, as you said, it was around 200,000 that Mark had, stored or recovered from the Cold War, but most of it's still missing, and their bulk is still gone. But where did they go? That's the mystery of the Bitcoin saga that's been kind of unsolved for a long time. Investigators initially traced large portions of this Bitcoin to BTCE. It was a shady exchange. It was run by Alexander Vinnik, who was arrested in Greece in 2017. So 3 years after the hack happened, and Vinnik was actually accused of laundering billions through this platform called BTCE, and that included a lot of Mt. Gox coins and a lot of other Bitcoin heists that we will talk about in maybe another time. So yeah. It was a big deal.
Yeah, and I suggest we cut to Jake Adelstein again, because he will explain to us how Vinnik was identified and finally arrested by the FBI in Greece at the time.
650,000 bitcoins that disappeared. Most of those can be traced to Alexander Vinnik, who was running a cryptocurrency site called BTCE from Russia. But he wasn't acting alone. So, even on the blockchain, you can trace the transactions to many places, but where did all those coins, where did those 650,000 bitcoins go? That nobody knows. And, the Japanese police aren't going to investigate because they've already screwed this one up and they're not interested in finding out. And the incentive to find out has been drastically diminished by the fact that a lot of people who lost money on Mt. Gox are now being repaid. I think by October of this year, the majority of people who lost their money with Mt. Gox are going to be repaid some compensation. And what is really bizarre about that is, okay, I'm not really good at finance, but I'll explain this as best I can. They announced that 850,000 bitcoins had been looted from Mt. Gox. That was the original announcement. It turns out that because of sloppy accounting, there were 200,000 bitcoins left. Now, Mark didn't take those bitcoins and run or hide them. He turned them over to the trustee of the firm, and who sat on those bitcoins for years and years and years. And then, in what is almost never happened in financial history, the price of Bitcoin surged so much that Mt. Gox went from being a company that was in the red and completely insolvent to being a company that was in the black, worth like millions of dollars, billions of dollars, because the price of Bitcoin had gone so much. I had no idea that this was happening. And I can tell you when I first learned that suddenly Bitcoin prices had surged. Leo Lewis, who is now the bureau chief of the Financial Times, and I think he was, a young reporter at the time, called me and said, "Hey, Jake, I need to get a hold of Mark Karpeles." And of course, he knows that I know Mark Karpeles because when Mark was arrested, his lawyer asked me to take care of Mark's cats for a couple weeks, which was, I love animals, and, the cats are certainly innocent, which I agreed to do. Anyway, that was pretty funny. And actually having access to Mark's house was one of the ways that I knew that he had been talking to people in the Secret Service and the IRS and the FBI about Silk Road, because they had their business cards on his desk. Of course I'm going to look, because I'm a journalist. Don't ask me to look at your cats. I'll go through all your drawers. Anyway, so Leo says, like, "Hey, Jake, I need to get a hold of Mark Karpeles, because suddenly Mt. Gox is no longer insolvent. It is worth hundreds of millions of dollars, because Bitcoin prices have surged so much. And I'd like to get some commentary from him. I'd like to find out if that will change, redistributing money to people who've lost their funds. What will happen next?" And he's like, "Please get back to me as soon as possible." And I said, "Okay, I will reach out to Mark and I will get back to you as soon as possible, Leo." And as I was about to call Mark, I realized that I had one Bitcoin left. That I had bought a Bitcoin and I had bought a Bitcoin just to see how it worked. Like, sometime after Mt. Gox collapsed, and I was getting near to I was worried about my daughter's college tuition. So before I called Mark, I immediately got online and I cashed my Bitcoin in for either between $10,000 to $20,000, moved it into my daughter's college fund, and then I called Mark.
Right. So did Mark get any of that money himself, or was it all stuck in the receivership?
The receivership. Now, he could be lying to me, but that is what he says. He doesn't get anything from the receivership. And the formula is so complicated. It's kind of like, did you have cash with Mt. Gox? Did you have Bitcoins with them? Did you have fiat currency? All of those things are factored in by what you had. Some people are getting back more money than they had at the time because the price of Bitcoin has surged so much. Some people are getting a lot less than what they had. The variables and the formulas for those are honestly beyond me. But I do know that people are getting repaid, and I do know the first big wave of payments should be finishing by October of this year.
Okay. And I've also heard that a lot of people didn't claim anything because they didn't want to be identified.
I believe there are also people who were worried that being identified might connect them to the Silk Road, or was more trouble than it was worth, or are paranoid that, that this whole payback operation was a way to for the government to monitor, Bitcoin and catch, people who were, libertarians and anti-government. So there's certainly those fears as well. There's a lot of paranoia in the Bitcoin community.
Okay. So how finally was Vinnik identified?
Vinnik was identified as the main culprit because of posts that he had made on his real name about his dissatisfaction with funds seized from Mt. Gox, and also by blockchain analysis by Tigran Gambaryan. So Tigran Gambaryan, for those who don't know, is, the ultimate crypto wizard. Nobody is better at doing blockchain analysis than Tigran. And he had been tracking a series of Bitcoin hackings and thefts for several months, not just only Mt. Gox, but other places. And he was pretty convinced that Vinnik had been behind them or involved in them. Looking as money was going, fiat currency and Bitcoin going on the blockchain, and also things that Vinnik had said. He had identified himself as an online post and complaints that were able to link accounts and things. He made critical errors, and they were pretty convinced that Vinnik was the guy. And one of the things they really needed to do to make their case was they needed the database of Mt. Gox, right? So I think in a very hot summer, maybe 2004, 2016, probably 2016, Tigran came to Japan to talk to the Japanese police and get a hold of the Mt. Gox database so they would have everything that they needed to track down Vinnik and capture the person that had hacked Mt. Gox and other Bitcoin exchanges. And the Japanese government basically told him to go fuck himself. So I had reached out to Tigran via email, and he had completely ignored me. And the reason I was able to reach out to him via email is because his business card was on Mark's desk. Remember, a couple years previously, I was at Mark's house caring for the cats, me and Natalie. And so he had written that. Me and Natalie had both written him, and so he's getting no headway with the Japanese police, right? They're not cooperating with him. He wants that database. And so, and he knows that I understand how the cops work. He can't make heads or tail of it. And he basically writes us back and says, hey, let's meet for dinner. Tigran's wife is Japanese. He's been to Japan before. So he has a kind of, a connection to Japan. So we met at an izakaya, which is like a Japanese pub. It's really hot. Tigran is in a t-shirt. We're talking there with him, and he's asking me why won't the Japanese cops cooperate with this? And I'm like, you think that they want to capture the right guy? If you're telling them that Mt. Gox was hacked by someone else, that you make them look like idiots. Of course, no one wants to look like an idiot, Tigran. They're never going to give you this database. as we're talking to him, I suddenly get the sense like, oh, like this guy seems to know who the real culprit is, and I'm like, I think I sort of know who the real culprit is as well. So, as we're sitting there, we get to what I like to call the negotiation stage of things, and I'm like, okay, I know Mark and I know his lawyer. Like, I can probably get you the database, but there's going to be a condition on that. And he's like, what are your conditions? Like, what do you want? I said, well, first of all, I'm a reporter, so I want a scoop. So I want, if I get you this database and you capture the guy, I want a 24-hour heads up. I want to have the exclusive. And I said, the second thing is, if I get you this, and then when you put out a press release, you have to say that this guy you nabbed is the person who hacked Mt. Gox in the press release. Because, Mark is a sketchy guy, and I'm not even actually sure he's innocent. But this is an important part of the case. So if you establish that, that makes a difference. That might change the outcome of his trial. And so he sort of sits there and he's kind of like, okay, on the first one, fuck you. Nobody gets 24 hours in advance. Not going to happen. It's like, maybe I could give you 12 hours in advance, and it's going to be very, it's going to be very circumspect. I'm certainly not going to give it to you before we arrest the guy. Not going to happen. And I'm like, okay. He said, the second one, I can give you a gentleman's agreement that I will do it. And I'm like, okay, I will hold up my end of the bargain. So reached out to his lawyer, reached out to Mark. He did have the database hidden away, but the database was like 4, 5, maybe 8 gigabytes, right? It's also encoded. It's encrypted, right? Mark's not as dumb as some people say he is. And I realized, like at this time, like 2016, you could not transfer 8 gigabytes of data, the internet, just not possible. So I'm like, okay. I'm like, all right, I will bring you the drive myself. I'm like, and of course the FBI and the IRS has no money, so you're not gonna pay me to go bring it. So I'm like, fine. And I bought this, cheap ticket to San Francisco. I'm like, I'll go, cheap to San Francisco. And then I had a ticket going home to visit my parents. I'm like, I'll go to San Francisco for a day, stay with a friend. I'll hand over the database. All those arrangements are made. I get to San Francisco. I go in the morning. It's Labor Day weekend, I think, and the FBI building is closed. There's nobody at the building to meet me and pick up the database. So now I've got this database that is critical to their case. I'm in the United States, and I'm like, I write to one of the special agents. I write to Tigran, and I write to, I write to Tigran. And I'm like, hey, Tigran, I'm here. There's nobody here. What do you want me to do? It's not like I can fit this database in the mail slot. And I'm like, I'm leaving tomorrow. And it's like, and I'm not coming back. So what do you want me to do? Because, don't I actually have to hand this over to a real person so there's the chain of evidence? I know enough about federal law that isn't that required. And he's like, holy, kind of like, holy shit. So, he writes to his boss. His boss starts writing to other people. And they're so frenzied because they really want this, that everybody is BCC'd, but not BCC'd. Everybody is CC'd. So, a couple hours later, not only do I finally have a meeting with someone working this case to hand over the hard drive, I have every single special agent. I'm most of the special agents working on this case. I have all their emails, and I'm like, wow, this is quite a treasure trove. But you could see that as a sign that that as a journalist, I'd earned a reputation as someone who was trusted because I didn't abuse that thing, and eventually, I'm put in touch with this Chinese-American special agent named Brian Wong, and he's doing something in Chinatown, and we end up in this kind of like bar with exotic dancers. It's not really like a strip bar, but there's like a lady sometimes in like a platform, like dancing scantily clad, having drinks, and and I hand him over the hard drive, and we discuss the contents, and I sign a form, and go on my merry way. And Tigran, they feel who is the guy. They track him, and when he makes the mistake of going on vacation in Greece, they nab him. And true to his word, he put exactly what I had asked in the press release, and someone sent me an anonymous email, and I don't even know if it was Tigran, that the real suspect had been nabbed in Greece a few hours before the official announcement, with the details. But unfortunately, I mean, nobody cares about this unless you're a reporter. To reporters, this is a big deal because you always want to have the scoop, right? Fortunately, at the time that I got notice of this, it was in the middle of the night in New York, and there was no one at the Daily Beast who could put up my article. So I ended up landing at the same time as everybody else. I mean, maybe I had a little more detail, but I wasn't, it wasn't my scoop. I didn't have the scoop of what would have been like one of the scoops of the year. I could have been leading the pack, but no, I just landed there with everybody else. That was okay, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, but, I mean, by that time you were an insider.
No, it's one of the reasons I really like Tigran is he's an honorable guy. And definitely the Department of Justice press release, mentioned that Vinnik is also suspected of hacking, Mt. Gox, and that made a huge difference in the trial. Because if the U.S. government is saying, we have caught the real criminal, well, even the prosecutors have a tough time denying that. And I remember in the trial, the prosecutor said, well, Vinnik hasn't been indicted yet, so, the announcement is meaningless. And I think the judge just gave him this look like, are you like what the fuck are you talking about? Vinnik.
So
Vinnik
goes to prison.
First, he's
caught
by the U.S. authorities. But he's held in Greece for a while, and then there's all this extradition fight. Everybody wants a piece of Vinnik. He's won in so many countries. I believe France staked a claim on Vinnik. So he shovels back and forth for several countries before finally winding up in prison, where in the United States, of all places. And he's not there for very long before Donald J. Trump decides to release him and exchange him for a school teacher who was arrested for marijuana possession in Russia, right? That's how Vinnik gets out. Vinnik, who had always asserted as innocent and who was definitely connected to some Russian oligarchs, gets released by Donald Trump, and is a free man and is welcomed back to Russia like a conquering hero. In my own brain, I've always
right, and I mean, the Bitcoin community doesn't react to that. I mean, that's pretty.
The Bitcoin community is flustered, but the Bitcoin community
end of a story.
Schizophrenic in the sense that Donald Trump has been a huge proponent of deregulating cryptocurrency, making cryptocurrency a big thing. Since he took office, cryptocurrency prices surged. I mean, they go up and down, but I think under his office, the price of Bitcoin went past $100,000 for the one BTC, one Bitcoin, went past $100,000 for the first time ever. So they don't really want to criticize Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. And if you criticize what happens with Vinnik, you're criticizing Donald Trump, and that puts you on the bad side of one of the most vindictive weasels in political history. Now, who wants to do that? These guys are about money. You don't want to make an enemy of Donald Trump. So I think people have been pretty quiet about it. I've always suspected that Donald Trump was a Kremlin asset, that he had been raised by the Kremlin since in his early days visiting Russia. And, we all know that they supplied the money to build some of his Trump towers. But when he released Vinnik for a school teacher, I mean, I've never been more convinced that it's Trump Putin, right? It's like one entity. They're the same thing. For me, that was like the nail in the coffin. If you're going to release Alexander Vinnik to Russia in exchange for a low-level, no intelligence value school teacher, you are clearly being run by the Kremlin.
So Vinnik is just one part of the puzzle, right? There are a lot of conspiracy theories, and it's not the same thing, but it's often described as the Malaysian Airlines, that kind of mystery in the crypto level. I know people didn't lose their lives here, but in terms of finance, it was a catastrophic level of loss. A lot of people lost their life saving. People who would have that amount of money today could have changed their lives completely, missed out on every bit of that opportunity. So it was a big mystery, and Vinnik was one part of the puzzle. There were other theories like insider negligence. Some community members and leaders suspect that insider, even Karpelès, moved funds during the chaos. And honestly, it wouldn't have been hard because the system was a chaos. It was a complete sham. in everywhere. So that theory, not proven, but we can't neither confirm or deny that.
Right. Well, being French too, I have a deep sympathy for Mark Karpeles, and I know it was like a completely new outfit. It was a new side of the internet and the way the ecosystem was building up. So I mean, as I said at the beginning, accidents are bound to happen in this kind of case, but still, I mean, with the 200,000 Bitcoin, the people who were investors in and older in Mt. Gox at the time are going to recover, at least in dollars term, most of their money from the receiver in Japan. So it's not all ends when that ends well, but at least they're not totally losing everything. And another interesting part of the story is that actually a lot of people didn't make any claims about the lost Bitcoin, because most of clients of Mt. Gox at the time didn't want to be identified and didn't want public to know that they were holders of Bitcoins, because maybe they didn't come from a very legitimate way of doing business. So that's another side of the story.
I think as an industry, it's important to understand that, yeah, it was a big case, it was a lot of money, but it kind of shaped where the industry is today, how we are today. Mt. Gox failure led to, a lot of changes in how crypto businesses are handled, how they're seen, the security mechanisms. I would say personally, because I'm from a security background, I would say the whole Mt. Gox incident kind of it pioneered the sector of blockchain analytics at the initial level, because that's where all the interest came from, that the security was a major threat in this industry. And yeah, from Karpelès' business mistakes, a lot of high-end Web3 developers ended up, taking financial heads as business partners, as CEOs, and that's how the industry was shaped. So yeah, it was a catastrophic failure, but it wasn't, there was a sunshine at the end of it, because it kind of led the industry to where it is today.
I think the crypto is a mirror of our times, and what's really interesting in the tale is what happened with Vinnik, because he seems to be like the main culprit. He was arrested in Greece. He spent some time in prison in Greece. Then he was jailed for some time in France, and finally he was extradited to the USA, and he was in jail in the USA until Donald Trump, a couple of months ago, decided to trade him with a US citizen during one of Vitkov's visits to Putin, and you can see that there seems to be some kind of merge between the crypto industry, all the shady side of the business, and finally the relationship that seems to be growing between Donald Trump, the crypto, and Russia. So I think, strangely enough, years and years after, the Mt. Gox story remains very relevant to what is the new cycle now for us in 2025.
Absolutely. Well, that's the story, and this is not the first time that anyone discussed Mt. Gox. We are not gonna be the last ones, and at Being Crypto, we're gonna be talking about this story for a long time, and I know that, because it does come up every time when there's something linked to Mt. Gox, it gets picked up like crazy. So yeah, so I can say that from Being Crypto, the first edition of the Vanishing Bitcoin today, we presented to you. We want to thank Jake Adelstein for his brilliant input in this investigation, in this podcast. And this is the first edition. Please join us for more interesting and more unknown mysterious stories on cryptocurrency.
Okay, thanks. And if you happen to be in Ibiza, you find a pair of pants, and don't hesitate to send it back to Being Crypto headquarters. Thanks. Bye-bye.
That's all.